Want to trade with Rithika? Join Chase at www.laductrading.com/chase.
All right, welcome back. Hope you had a great week. So last week we were relatively sideways until Friday, where you can see we pretty much broke this uptrend, as a matter of which we went down into first support, broke that, and then came down into the second support. So now we are still, not much has changed. We are still in a sideways chop. You can see here we can kind of draw another channel this way and another channel this way. So I mean, again, even if we were to kind of sell off, you can see here this is a box, we would still kind of be within this range. And you can see here, since November of last year, we have kind of been within this sideways range in the market. So that's the reason why we can't yet tell whether the market is going sideways or whether we are just going in a wave 4 chop that I mentioned before we move higher for the wave 5. So a waiting game at this point. You can see here we did have that uptrend from August, and now we're kind of in a sideways chop. So it is kind of essential to see whether we stay above this 5860 level. If we come down and bounce off this level, we would again still be sideways digestion before it makes the final leg to the upside. However, people may ask me, like, what are some bear levels? You can see here we have kind of just been sideways. We have been unable to get above the 6100 for 2 weeks in a row. So I would say any weakness and any follow through below 6010 will very likely come back down to retest that 5924 and even the 5850. But I think, as I mentioned before, I think this level holds. I do believe that any dip will get bought, and we still have one more push before the market actually tops. But again, we have seen in the past that this is a very big topping zone, the top of this trend line. So it's not lost on me that we could be forming a topping pattern. So I would say if we do break below that 5860, then I would be a lot more bearish and be looking for much longer short targets. But for now, I still think we are sideways. We look at QQQ, kind of the same thing. We try to break out 530 level, we've come back down. If we stay below 525, then it's likely we have some more weakness back down into the 500 support. But as I've mentioned, till we pop into the top of the channel on QQQ, I don't think the broader market has topped. And IWM, again, we couldn't break above 228, and here we're coming back down into that 210, 215 level. So there is still a lot more room on IWM for weakness. So I could see some weakness in the market, maybe come back into that support level. We go to the 4-hour on QQQ, we can see that the market is trying to be weak. But again, even if we do break down, I do think 510 to 500 would eventually hold on QQQ. So it's a matter of when are we breaking above that 530, 535. When we do, then we kind of move higher on QQQ. So I am still thinking that we are still in a wave 4 sideways chop, and we still have one more leg higher. So I'm still not moving away from that. I just think that we could have a bit more weakness in selling in a wave 4 before it happens. And Nvidia earnings are coming up this week, so that could again kind of shape a bit more movement in the market. But something to note is the wicks is getting tight, but again, we are at the top of the channel. So again, we could kind of have oversold bounces. Again, wicks we've seen, it does tend to have those volatile moves into 2021, but again, we reject and we come back down. So I kind of expect the same. I do think that we would kind of again have that 2021 and again reject and come back to the downside. I still see that $11, $10 target that I told you about before we really have a much wider explosive move. So what I see on wicks and the dollar, again, we are kind of having that digestion. So both the market and the dollar are pretty weak at the moment. And you look at the yields and the yields as well, you can see here we are kind of being weak. So if the market wanted to turn around, it could on the back of a weak yield and a weak dollar. Again, keep an eye on key levels. You can see here on the chart of SPX that we try to break above, we failed, and once we failed, we had a sell-off. So the levels you would kind of be looking at would be this 6,000 level I mentioned. You break 6,000, then it's very likely you come into 5966, and then 5925 would be your next target. And we know that we do have a gap to fill here, 5865. So that's the reason for me personally, as long as we stay in that 5850 to 5860, I do think that a gap fill here wouldn't be that bad. We would just be in this wave 4 before we move higher for that wave 5. So with that being said, let's look at this week's watch list. And MSTR, again, the reason for that is we can see if the market is weak, we do know that this has a gap to fill. So if it breaks that 295 level, it should easily be able to come down into that 280, 275 levels. So that's the reason I have MSTR puts is I do think that this could, if the support breaks, it will easily fill the gap. But again, I do still see this as a wave 4. Once it fills the gap, I do think that this will get bought and move higher. So just short-term weakness, I think MSTR could be weak. On the other hand, I do think Baidu, for example, could be one of those stocks that gets bought up because China has been, infusing stimulus and the stocks are reacting positively to it. So I am looking to see whether Baidu will hold this. I would say 84 to 87 would be a good buy level, and that should trigger into that 120 level. So I do think whether I'm bullish or bearish, Baidu will move up into that 108 to 115 level. So this will kind of be your target on Baidu. So again, you can see that we have kind of broken out of this downtrend structure on Baidu. So again, any weakness could get bought up on Baidu. So keep an eye on that. The next one I have is AMD. And again, I am looking for a short-term bottom, but again, you can see here, this is kind of a bear flat. And you can see here, this is where we have resistance. We rejected the resistance. So maybe it has just one more low. So I do think if we are weak, AMD could be a stock that faces extended weakness because of bad earnings. Below 111, we ideally come back into 108, 105. And I do think that when we do hit this demand zone near 100, it will have a very large bounce. So do you think maybe a little bit more weakness on AMD? And last but not the least, what I have is MRK. These biotech stocks have been kind of doing well. And you can see it did have that bounce off that fib level. So that is a good weekly candle. So I would say ideally if it gets supported over this 87.5, it should continue higher to kind of fill this gap higher, because you can see here, this is a bottom reversal. It does have a gap to fill. So if it does, it's here, it's coming into a moving average. So ideally, if this digests same as Baidu, it will likely get bought up and go up to fill the gap. So keep an eye on MRK. You should also note that the reason it's bouncing is, you can see here, it's trying to recover itself back into the top of this trend line. So it does have a bit more work to do. This $90 level, this 92 would be super important. If it wants to go up into that gap fill at 98. So that's all I have for this week. I hope you have a great day.
Join Chase to trade with Rithika and other experts. Subscribe to LaDuc Trading YouTube channel for more Wolf's weekly wave list videos and other content.